Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. West Asia is on a knife edge. Iran says it wants to punish Israel. The US says an attack is being planned and airlines say we are cancelling flights. So all the signs are there. Is Iran planning to go to war with Israel directly? More importantly, can the region afford a second or a wider conflict? We'll look at the possible consequences. Meanwhile, gold prices have touched a record high. Central banks across the world are buying gold in large quantities. What does this mean for you, the consumer, and why are they doing it in the first place? In Washington, the US and Japan are upgrading their relationship. Why is India sending defense attaches to global south countries? How is the AI race heating up? What does India's Prime Minister have to say about China? Why are doctors in Kenya on strike? How Rishi Sunak's choice of sneakers has led to an uproar? And finally, do you have a love-hate relationship with your sibling? We'll tell you why they're so important in our lives. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In India, controversy erupts in Rahul Gandhi's constituency, Wayanad. The BJP's Kerala president, who is taking on the Congress leader, says if he wins the election, he will change the name of a town associated with Tipu Sultan. The town got its name after the Muslim ruler invaded the region in the 1700s. Mali's junta suspends all activities by political parties, saying the move is to maintain public order. On the 1st of April, more than 80 political parties had issued a joint statement calling for presidential elections. The West African country has been under military rule since 2020. Ukrainian parliament approves an army mobilization law to boost troop numbers. Earlier this month, President Zelensky had lowered the mobilization age from 27 to 25. The Ukrainian military is on the back foot as Russia intensifies its offensive. In South Korea, the opposition sweeps the National Assembly elections. The leader of the ruling party resigns. South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol promises reforms. Yoon still has 3 years left in office, but the results have turned him into a lame duck president. And a billionaire property tycoon is sentenced to death in Vietnam. Truong My Lan was found guilty in a multi-billion-dollar fraud case. It is one of the biggest corruption cases in Vietnam's history. Is West Asia preparing for another war, a more devastating one? I ask because the indications are all there. US and Israeli forces are on high alert. Iran is talking about punishing Israel. Flights on the route are being cancelled and frantic diplomatic activity is underway. All the classic signs that something big is about to happen. The question is, what? US officials think that Iran will attack Israel. It could be a major missile strike or a drone attack, and it's a very confident assessment. One official said it's a question of when, not if. But why is Iran escalating? Because of what happened last week. An Israeli strike hit the Iranian consulate in Syria. 7 Iranian soldiers were killed, including 2 top commanders, and since then, Iran has vowed revenge. Their supreme leader repeated those threats on Wednesday. He used his Eid speech to target Israel.
Embassies in any country are considered part of the soil of the country that owns them. When they attack our consulate, it's as if they attacked our land. The wicked regime made a mistake in this case. It must be punished and it will be punished.
The US is quite worried about this. So what are they doing? Pursuing a dual track. The first is diplomacy. Joe Biden's envoy in West Asia is working overtime. He has reached out to 4 foreign ministers, those of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar and the UAE. He gave all of them the same message. Tell Iran to dial down tensions. And the message was delivered. On Wednesday, Iran's foreign minister spoke to the same 4 counterparts. Tehran says regional tensions were discussed, and that's the first track. The second is military preparation. Reports say a top US general is visiting Israel. He heads the US military's Central Command. The plan is to prepare Israel for the attack, maybe even plot a response. Plus, you had a strong statement from Joe Biden. He's been scaling back his support for Israel. And once Iran was mentioned, his attitude changed. Biden now says that his support remains ironclad.
As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
And what about Israel? Their soldiers are on high alert. If Iran attacks, they will hit back. That was a message from Israel's foreign minister. So things are pretty tense. Even airlines are worried about a spillover. German carrier Lufthansa has suspended its Tehran flights. And there's a reason why. On Wednesday, Iran state media posted some worrying news. They said Iran's military was conducting drills, so the national airspace was closed. Later, they deleted that particular article, but the rumors had spread by then, which brings us to Iran's possible attack. What could it look like? Experts have mentioned two possible options. First is a cyber attack. It could target Israel's civilian or military infrastructure. The second is a missile or drone strike. And this is what the US fears. But such an option raises two questions. A, where will the attack come from? And B, what will it target? Iran has always used proxies to target Israel, like the Hezbollah in Lebanon, or the Hamas in Gaza, or the Houthis in Yemen. They have never launched attacks from their own territory. If they do it now, it will be a major escalation. Frankly, it depends on how far Iran wants to take it. As for what will be attacked, again, it depends on Iran's appetite. Israeli military installations are a possibility, but those are high-risk targets. A low-risk option is Israeli foreign missions, your embassies and consulates. The government knows this. Around 28 Israeli missions across the world have been shut. Reports say the ones in Bahrain, Morocco, Jordan and Egypt have been evacuated. They've suspended work in their missions in Delhi and Mumbai, according to reports, and security has also been stepped up. So Israel is bracing for the worst. But are they doing anything to prevent the attack? To maybe signal a climb down? Well, we are seeing mixed signals. Israel is still attacking targets in Gaza. A major strike was carried out on Wednesday. They bombed a car that was carrying Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh's sons. 3 of them were killed, but there was collateral damage. Hamas says Haniyeh's grandchildren were also killed, 3 girls and 1 boy. So there is no let-up on the battlefield. At the same time, diplomacy is making headway. Israel has agreed to some concessions for a ceasefire deal. They will allow 150,000 Palestinians to return to northern Gaza. No checks, no restrictions. In return, Hamas must give information about the Israeli hostages. Just one problem, though. Many of them are feared dead. The deal requires Hamas to exchange 40 hostages. But some reports say Hamas may not have 40 living hostages. And if this is true, it could derail the talks. Of course, Iran will be watching all of this. They will want to pick the right moment to strike. And even if they don't, this standoff will have long-term implications, especially on their nuclear program. The Iranians have always been paranoid about their security, and now they will be more paranoid. Could that spill over into their nuclear ambitions? Well, the indications are not good. A new report says that Iran is a short dash away from a bomb. What does that mean? They could have weapons-grade uranium in a few days or a few weeks. A bomb could be made within 6 months. Again, this is worrying news. A nuclear bomb would be a great assurance for Iran, yes, but it would also trigger a regional arms race. So attack or not, these are dangerous times, and we can only hope that calmer heads prevail. Our next story is about gold. It's on fire. Prices have touched a record high this week. Yesterday, gold prices in India crossed the 73,000 mark, 73,000 rupees, that's around $875 for 10 grams of pure gold. At the beginning of this year, the price was hovering around 65,000 rupees, almost $780. So India has seen a sharp increase. What about the international markets? Same story. Globally, gold prices are up by over 16%. And what's driving this rally? The world's central banks. They're buying gold in large quantities, and they've been at it for a while. It started with China almost 2 years ago. China's central bank is called the People's Bank of China, or the PBC. It has embarked on a gold buying spree. And how much gold have they bought? 225 metric tons in 2023 alone. Beijing bought more gold than any other central bank last year, and Beijing is not done yet. From January to April, China added more gold to its reserve. In fact, since November 2022, they've been piling it up. As of today, they have more than 2,200 tons of gold. China has 2,200 tons of gold. Why do they need so much of it? What is driving this buying spree? Fear, perhaps. Recent geopolitical tensions, specifically what happened with Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the West cracked down on Moscow's reserves. They went after Russia's financial assets. These assets were being held by Western institutions. We're talking about some $300 billion. Russian wealth controlled by the West, $300 billion. This was part of Russia's foreign exchange reserves. The West froze all these accounts, so Moscow can no longer access its own money. In fact, there's also talk of giving this money to Ukraine. It's been proposed many times. Give this blocked Russian money to Ukraine. So far, Western powers have resisted. Irrespective, Russia does not have access to its money, and Beijing sees this as a cautionary tale. So it's losing faith in Western financial institutions and buying gold as an insurance, a potential hedge against Western financial instruments, like the American dollar. China still holds a large reserve of the American currency. As of last month, they had over $3 trillion. So Beijing has not completely given up on the greenback, but it's diversifying, and it's not the only one doing so. Diversifying reserves and stocking up on gold. Other central banks are doing the same. From June last year to January this year, at least 5 other central banks bought gold for 8 consecutive months. And which are these banks? Turkey, India, Kazakhstan, Jordan, and the Czech Republic. Each of them bought more than 1 ton of gold recently. And in this list, India stands out. Its gold purchases have surged, touching almost a 2-year high last month. In recent months, India has bought more than 13 tons of gold. So how much gold does the Reserve Bank of India have? More than 800 tons as of January 2024, 800 tons of gold with the RBI. This is believed to be worth more than $50 billion. Now, India's overall reserves in March stood at around $645 billion. And given this number, $645 billion, the value of gold reserves may not be significant. But its rise is, and there is a clear shift. Central banks around the world want to cut risks. They want diversified reserves, where they don't have to depend on a single currency or instrument. So if you're looking to buy gold, to invest in it, what should you do? Is it a good time to buy? Well, if you're price sensitive, you may want to wait. The gold market is expected to remain volatile. Prices have already touched record highs, and experts predict more growth through the year. Banks like JP Morgan predict a peak next year in the second half of 2025. So if you're planning a major gold purchase, if there's a wedding in your family, or if you're just looking to park some cash, chances are you'll have to shell out more money. But if you're just looking to make a quick buck, exercise caution. Just like the central banks of the world, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Think about diversifying your portfolio. Now let's turn to the US, where Joe Biden just threw a massive party for an old friend, Japan. Their Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is on a state visit. It's the first in almost 9 years. I'm sure you know how state visits work. It's not just bilateral talk. It's a lot more. You have a ceremonial welcome at the White House, sometimes a private lunch, and of course the main event, a gala dinner. Both Biden and Kishida toasted the bilateral relationship, but Kishida had a secret weapon up his sleeve. A quote from American cult classic, Star Trek.
We may be divided by distance, but generations after generation, we've been brought together in the same hopes, the same values, the same commitment to democracy and freedom, and to dignity for all. And today, without question, our alliance is literally stronger than it has ever been.
Finally, let me conclude with a line from Star Trek, which you all know. To boldly go where no one has gone before. And boldly go. Cheers.
That was the fun part. Now we get to the business. Biden and Kishida have upgraded their defense partnership. They signed some 70 agreements, 70 deals, but 3 of them stood out. One, to create a joint command structure where American and Japanese officers work together. 2, a missile pact. Japan, Australia and the US will develop an air missile network, sort of like a common shield. And 3, a new trilateral exercise between the US, the UK and Japan. All these deals have the same goal, to create more interoperability between the militaries. Say an attack happens on Taiwan, the US and Japan should be able to respond fast and together. That's the goal here, and Kishida was very clear about it. He linked the situation in Ukraine to East Asia, a bit like saying Taiwan could be the next Ukraine.
ロシアによるウクライナ侵略については
Regarding Russia's aggression of Ukraine, based on a recognition that Ukraine today may be East Asia tomorrow, taking the issue as our own problem for Japan, I expressed our resolution to continue with stringent sanctions against Russia and strong support for Ukraine.
Biden's focus is also clear. He's hosted 5 leaders for state visits: Emmanuel Macron of France, Yoon Suk Yeol of South Korea, Narendra Modi of India, Anthony Albanese of Australia, and now Fumio Kishida of Japan. What is common about these 5 nations? They're all Indo-Pacific powers, even France, with islands in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. But tonight we're focusing on Japan. Are they ready for this military upgrade? Can Fumio Kishida lead it? And how has the US defended Japan in the past? Let's start with Kishida. He's been hit by a fundraising scandal. He's among the least popular Japanese leaders since 1947. And what's his approval rating? Just 26%. His cabinet is even worse. Only 20% Japanese approve of their performance. So Kishida is on shaky ground. But he's been clear about one thing: Japan must increase its military might. After the Second World War, Tokyo chose pacificism. They don't have a standing army. They have a self-defense force. But recently, we've seen a shift. It started with former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He increased defense spending by 10%, and now Kishida is building on it. Last year, he unveiled a new defense budget. Guess how much money has been set aside? $56 billion, which is a 16% increase in defense spending. Again, it's because of public opinion. Let me show you what a recent poll found. 83% Japanese fear an attack. From whom? Well, 89% people think that China is a concern. 87% say the attack may come from North Korea. So what do they want their government to do? Many of them would like to deepen the alliance with the US. 49% want Japan to expand its role within the alliance. The number was only 41% in 2020. So the last few years have changed public opinion. Most Japanese want a strong military, and the government is obliging. This week, Tokyo unveiled an aircraft carrier. It's their first one since the Second World War. What's more, it can service American F-35 fighter jets. So Japan is worried and arming itself. Which brings us to the United States. What role does Washington play in defending Japan? There are 3 parts to it. The first is a treaty, the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security. It was first signed in 1951, then tweaked and renewed in 1960. And what does the treaty say? Let me quote. Each party recognizes that an armed attack against either party in the territories under the administration of Japan would be dangerous to its own peace and safety, and declares that it would act to meet the common danger. It's not clear. It's not as clear as NATO's Mutual Defense Clause, but the assumption is that the US will defend Japan. That is the treaty. They will defend Japan even with nuclear weapons, because Tokyo is part of the US nuclear umbrella. Which brings us to the second part of their relationship: soldiers and bases. The US has more than 55,000 soldiers in Japan, not advisors, not civilian contractors, active duty troops, 55,000. And how many bases? In 2021, the United States had access to 120 bases in Japan, more than anywhere else in the world, 120 bases. And finally, the third part, weapons. Japan uses a lot of American equipment, like Patriot missiles. the F-35 fighter jets, the Cobra helicopters and the Apache helicopters. This year, a new deal was signed. Japan decided to buy hundreds of Tomahawk missiles. Total cost, more than $2.3 billion. It's really a give and take relationship. The US presence and weapons give Japan insurance, both against China and North Korea. In return, the US gets a staging point in East Asia, a place to rush in from if China invades Taiwan. And speaking of defense partnerships, India is on a mission to expand them. It's easier said than done, though. Most countries know India as a buyer of military equipment. So becoming a seller will be tough, which is why India is putting more people on the job. Reports say New Delhi has appointed 15 to 16 new defense attaches. They will be posted in new locations like Poland, Armenia, Tanzania, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Ivory Coast, and the Philippines. But what is a defense attaché? And what do they do? Well, usually these attaches are members of the armed forces. They're appointed to foreign missions. And their role depends on which mission they work in. If it's a friendly country, you will have to coordinate military affairs, maybe iron out defense deals. But if it's an unfriendly nation, things can be shady, like gathering information and even espionage. India's objective is the former, to strike more defense deals. Some of these attaches already work elsewhere, like in the US and Russia. Those missions are well staffed, so the Indian government is rationalizing the appointments. Basically, taking attaches from those countries and placing them in new locations. And this is very important because the global defense market is very competitive. You cannot expect to find buyers easily. You need to build lasting relationships. You must hard sell your product. And for that, attaches are important. We showed you the list of India's target customers. A couple of them were expected, like Armenia and the Philippines. Both countries have bought weapons from India. The Philippines bought the BrahMos missile in 2022. Armenia bought the Pinaka rocket launcher in 2023. So appointing attaches there was key. But beyond that, we can see two trends. One is the focus on Africa. India last sent an attaché to Ethiopia in the 1970s. It's been nearly 4 decades. And now India is sending one again. Same with Djibouti. The new attaché is the second officer to be appointed there. And do not forget, Djibouti has a lot of strategic significance. It is located in the Horn of Africa. It also hosts a Chinese overseas base. So having a foothold in Djibouti will be important. Another example is Tanzania. Again, not a random appointment. India is one of the biggest trading partners of this country. Many businesses there are owned by people of Indian origin. So India is not randomly looking at African customers. It is picking the right candidates. Which brings us to the second trend. A defense attaché in Europe, specifically in Poland. Now, this is an interesting appointment. On paper, it makes perfect sense. Poland has set aside some $33 billion for defense. That's almost 4% of their GDP. Plus, they are on a spending spree. Warsaw has almost 150 deals lined up this year, 150 defense deals. They have bought air defense systems from the US. They're looking at jets from South Korea and missiles from Britain. So Poland can be a very important customer. Having said that, it's uncharted territory for India. Most European countries buy weapons from the West. So breaking into that market is going to be tough. But India is trying anyway. It's pitching itself as a reliable and cost-effective alternative. And slowly it is working. India's defense exports reached 21,000 crore rupees in the last financial year. That's around $2.6 billion. It's 32% higher than the year before. So exports are clearly rising. But the government's target is much higher. Almost $6 billion by 2029. That's more than double the current exports. And to achieve that, India must do two things. The first is to find new customers, and the second is to sell high-end products like missiles and fighter jets. Because that's where the real money is. It may sound a bit unsavory, but now is the time to make money in the defense industry. There's a war underway in Europe. There's a conflict brewing in East Asia. So defense deals are on everyone's mind. Now onto the world of artificial intelligence. The AI race is heating up. In just 12 hours, we've seen the launch of 3 new models. They were from OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, Google and Mistral, which is a French AI startup. They've all come up with new advanced models within hours of each other. So new systems are emerging every day, and they're all competing for the top spot. And this advancement is praiseworthy. But it comes with its own set of problems. The regulators are failing to keep pace, and scams related to AI are multiplying. Deepfakes are offering investment advice, scammers are using voice tools to dupe people, and now the National Stock Exchange of India has issued a warning. Our next report has more.
It's the dawn of the AI age. Whether it's chips, phones, or ads, everything is about artificial intelligence. And big tech knows that. They are jockeying for the top spot in this race. There's a lot of buzz. There are a lot of new releases. In just a day, 4 companies have released new advanced AI models. The first was Meta. Meta has been lagging in the AI race, but now it's playing catch-up. Meta confirmed the release of a 3rd version of Llama. That's what the AI model is called. It would be published in a matter of weeks. Then there's Google. It released Gemini Pro 1.5. It's Google's most advanced large language model. Now, 2 launches are often enough for a day. But when was enough okay for Silicon Valley? OpenAI was next. The ChatGPT maker made artificial intelligence accessible. And now it's back with a new frontier model, the final version of GPT-4 Turbo. But that wasn't all. Across the Atlantic, another company had an announcement. It was Mistral, a French AI startup. They too released a new frontier model called Mistral 8X22B. So 24 hours, 4 launches. Clearly the race is heating up. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. New models are out every day. It all sounds good until it isn't. Artificial intelligence may be moving fast, but regulation isn't able to keep up, which has led to a plethora of scams. Today, the NSE issued a warning. That's India's National Stock Exchange. It warned about deepfake videos that are circulating. It shows NSE CEO and MD Ashish Kumar Chauhan. He talks about stock recommendations. The NSE has raised an alarm about these videos. It has cautioned investors against the deepfake videos. It has also said that its officials are not authorized to recommend or deal in any stocks. This is one of the many deepfake scams that's taking over the globe. In Hong Kong, a deepfake video call cost a company around $25 million. The call was thought to be from the CFO of the company, but it turned out to be a deepfake. Deepfake scams have surged by 3,000% in the last year. Scammers use voice cloning tools and deepfakes, all to dupe people and gain access to their bank accounts. Document manipulation is also on the rise, and it becomes much easier with improved AI tools. Take biometric verification, for instance. It's also gradually falling victim to this trend. So how do you tackle this? Well, by using artificial intelligence. I know it sounds rhetorical, but often AI tools can help spot AI frauds. AI tools are available to outsmart fake IDs. They can spot fraud attempts and help check for deepfakes in biometric verification. So the world of AI is making a lot of progress. There are new developments, new models, new scams. It's a fast-moving world. It has got it all, except for regulations. Laws that leave room for innovation but also mitigate the harmful effects of AI. We missed the bus with social media, but we can't afford to do that with AI.
Now let's talk about the India-China relationship. In the last 4 years, it has worsened. Tensions have escalated, the Ladakh standoff remains unresolved, and the troop deployments on both sides are going up. So we're not in a good place. And India's Prime Minister has taken this up. He has sent a message to Beijing. In his conversation with Newsweek, the American magazine, its latest edition, the magazine's latest edition, features Prime Minister Modi on the cover. This interview is making headlines, especially for his comments on China. So this is what the Indian Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting, "It is my belief that we need to urgently address the prolonged situation on our borders so that the abnormality in our bilateral interactions can be put behind us. Stable and peaceful relations between India and China are important, not just for our 2 countries, but the entire region and world." Look at how the Prime Minister describes the situation on the border and the state of the relationship. He says the border situation must be addressed urgently, and he calls the India-China relationship abnormal. Now, his cabinet colleagues have been using the same language and a remarkably sharper tone when speaking about China. This week, Rajnath Singh attacked China. Rajnath Singh is India's defense minister. He was visiting Arunachal Pradesh, a state that is part of India's northeast. But China claims this state, this Indian state, one of its many bogus claims on Indian land. It calls Arunachal South Tibet. Now, this has no basis in history and no backing from the international community, but China keeps escalating the dispute. Last month, it gave Chinese names to 30 territories in Arunachal, 30 places in the state. Rajnath Singh said such tactics only hurt the relationship further. Last month, S. Jaishankar adopted a similar tone. He is India's External Affairs Minister. He said the border situation is, quote-unquote, very tense and dangerous. He called for a swift resolution. And what is China's response to all of this? It was swift and on predictable lines.
China has noted the remarks made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. A healthy and stable relationship between China and India serves the common interests of both sides and is conducive to peace and development in the region and the world. The border issue is not the entirety of China-India relations and should be managed properly in an appropriate place within the bilateral relationship.
The border situation does not define the relationship. This has been China's position, meaning forget about the border, focus on the business. We'll keep provoking you at the border and you must keep giving us business. That's essentially what China is saying. At the same time, it is escalating the military presence, not just in the Himalayas, but also on the high seas. As we speak, 3 Chinese ships are docked in the Indian Ocean region. The Xiang Yang Hong 1, operating in the Bay of Bengal near the Andaman Islands. The Xiang Yang Hong 3, deployed in the Maldives. Reports say this ship entered the region 3 months ago. And finally, we have the Da Yang Hao. This ship is currently close to Mauritius. It is operating with an anti-piracy task force of the PLA. So what mission are these ships on? As always, China won't spell it out. It calls them research vessels. But they're linked to the Chinese military and they have a history of intruding into the exclusive economic zones of other countries. What's an exclusive economic zone? EEZ. It's an extension of a country's territory, but in the ocean. It's their exclusive zone. Others cannot enter it at will, but China was never a fan of rules, so it intrudes into the territory of others, and that poses another challenge for India. Dialogue has not helped. Tough talk has not moved the needle. India has a complex challenge in China. It has deep pockets and an expanding military. So India's only option at the moment is to build deterrence. Our next story is from Africa, from Kenya in the east. For almost a month now, Kenya's healthcare sector has been in a crisis. Hundreds of doctors are on strike. They're demanding higher wages and better working conditions. But the government has refused to budge. Kenya's president says there's simply no money. So there's a stalemate. And the government is trying to coerce the doctors to get back to work. In the latest move, 100 doctors have been fired from a hospital in the capital, Nairobi. Here's our report.
Kenya is facing a medical crisis. Hundreds of doctors are on strike. They are demanding higher wages, jobs for medical graduates, and complete medical coverage for themselves, among other things. The strike started on March 15th, and for almost a month now, Kenya's hospitals have been left paralyzed.
Nothing else we can do. You just hit well, waiting either doctors to resume in their jobs or to go to your father. Nothing else. What else can we do? Yes, and comforting them, giving them our chest to lean on at the moment. Yes.
At the heart of this row are medical interns. Before the strike began, the Kenyan government put out this notice. It's a revised salary threshold for medical interns. Look at the minimum amount, 27,000 Kenyan shillings. That's a bit more than $200. That is the all-inclusive monthly stipend the Kenyan government was offering doctors.
Interns have to be posted, and they have to be posted and paid enough money. They're the ones who run the facilities. They're the ones who are in charge of the wards, and they're not being paid after working 16-hour shifts.
$200 a month as a medical intern, pulling off 16-hour shifts, only to walk home with less than $10 a day. The upper cap is 70,000 Kenyan shillings. That's slightly below $550 a month. You can see why Kenya's doctors are livid. They want the government to improve their wages and working conditions. The government has agreed to some of their demands. They've set the stipend to the maximum, 70,000 shillings. They've agreed to hire all medical interns looking for a posting, about 1,500 of them. And they've set aside a 2.4 billion shilling fund to facilitate all this. It sounds like the government is meeting the doctors halfway. So then why are the doctors still on strike? Because this is a far cry from what they were promised in 2017. Kenyan doctors had gone on strike in 2017 as well. That strike lasted 100 days. Back then, the Kenyan government had reached a compromise, a collective bargaining agreement or CBA. 7 years ago, Kenya's government had agreed to pay medical interns 212,000 shillings a month, thrice as much as they're offering today. Yet, Kenya's doctors are being told to take the deal and get back to work. However, the doctors are holding their ground.
Because government has refused to honor the collective bargaining agreement that we signed 7 years ago. The government is on strike, we have just joined them.
But the Kenyan government is testing their resolve. On Tuesday, a government hospital announced that 100 striking doctors had been sacked. This is the Kenyatta University Referral Hospital in the capital, Nairobi. They also said the doctors had already been replaced, mostly by interns. But 5 doctors had also been hired from nearby countries, 3 from Ethiopia, 1 from Tanzania, and 1 from Malawi. This looks like a pressure tactic by the Kenyan government. The president finally spoke out about the matter on Sunday.
I know we have a situation in Kenya with our doctors and interns. I want to implore on them that it is important for us as a nation to agree that we must live within our means.
Ruto says the doctors should take the latest deal for 70,000 shillings a month. He asked them to think about the country's future and take the deal for the greater good. Basically, he's playing good cop. The hospitals firing doctors are the bad cops, and Kenyan doctors are in the crosshairs.
Now let's turn to the UK, where a new scandal has erupted involving British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and a pair of Adidas sneakers, Adidas Sambas to be precise, one of the brand's most popular sneaker designs. It seems the British PM has now ruined Sambas for everyone. How? Just by wearing them apparently. And you might think I'm joking, but look at these headlines. Adidas Sambas were this year's coolest shoes until Rishi Sunak got a pair. The UK Prime Minister just ruined this classically cool sneaker. Did a politician ruin a trendy shoe? Or this over-the-top plea from British GQ, can Rishi Sunak leave the Adidas Samba alone, please? As you can see, the press is having a meltdown because Sunak wore some sneakers. It sounds absurd until you consider the context. Sunak is deeply unpopular in the UK. He's an unelected Prime Minister put in charge by his party, the UK Conservative Party, also known as the Tories. The Tories have been in power since 2010, and they've overseen a disastrous period in British history. Economically, the country is in the dumps, with high inflation and a cost of living crisis. Part of the reason is the war in Ukraine, but a lot also has to do with Brexit. The Tories led Britain out of the European Union, and British people are still paying the price for it. So what do the Tories do? Pin the blame primarily on illegal immigration and keep rotating prime ministers, probably in the hopes that people get confused and don't hold the party accountable. So Sunak is Prime Minister number 5, chosen to be the fall guy after the disaster that was Liz Truss. Whatever their other failures, the Tories have successfully gotten the public to hate Sunak. And now everything he touches turns to ash. And that apparently includes the iconic Adidas Sambas. Now, don't get me wrong, Sunak is not innocent. He's equally at fault for his unpopularity. He was part of the senior Tory leadership even before becoming Prime Minister. He championed some of these disastrous policies. So there's good reason for the public anger. But the reaction to his sneakers wasn't just about anger. It was also cringe. Sunak released 2 videos last week, both from his office, 10 Downing Street. He's talking to some finance influencers about tax and childcare policies, which is not the worst part. What really annoyed people was that at this moment, in the hallowed halls of 10 Downing Street, talking about taxation and childcare, Rishi Sunak decides to flaunt the sneakers. He was trying too hard, pretending to be the average Joe. When it's the opposite, that's true. Sunak is a multi-millionaire politician, the richest prime minister in British history, married to one of the richest Indian entrepreneurial families. Sunak is the definition of elite, but he expects the public to believe he's an everyman, someone who relates to their issues, to the masses, because he wears the same shoes as everyone else. Full marks for trying. And being rich is no crime. But this doesn't work. And this is not a one-off incident. Rishi Sunak has consistently drawn criticism for cringe. In February, he released this video. It was to promote a British ban on phones in school.
One of the biggest issues children and teachers grapple with every day is the impact of... See how frustrating that is. Almost 1/3 of secondary school pupils said their lessons were disrupted by phones. We know that they're a distraction in the classroom and cause bullying in schools.
His acting was considered peak cringe. Then there was his other foray into acting, his Home Alone style Christmas skit. The media called it bizarre. He's trying hard, but no matter what Sunak does, he gets flack for it. The Samba Rao isn't even his first footwear fail. Back in 2022, he was slammed for wearing Prada shoes worth about £500 to a construction site. That, of course, seems far more in character than the Sambas. The Samba stunt just seems performative. And it has spectacularly backfired. Sneakerheads are aghast and the press are going to town with it. So Sunak has come out with a cheeky apology.
Well, first of all, I just issue a fulsome apology to the Samba community. But in my defence, I would say I have been wearing Adidas trainers and Sambas and others, in fact, for many, many years.
One that is unlikely to undo the damage. For our next story, let's talk about Delhi. It's India's national capital, home to around 30 million people. But every year, these 30 million people wake up to a thick smog. Headlines scream about inaction. Doctors worry about lung health. And residents panic by masks and air purifiers. Toxic air is bad for our bodies, no doubt about it. But how bad is it for our mental health? A new government report is out. It says poor air can lead to anxiety and depression. It can also lead to other mental disorders. Our next report tells you why a battle for clean air is also a battle for mental health.
Every winter, the skies of New Delhi turn a hazy grey. Residents wake up to smog. Schools are shut. Construction is banned. Masks are back on. And there's a scramble to tackle pollution. We know that toxic air affects lung health. But it looks like our mental health too gasps for clean air. It was part of a report by the Delhi government. It was submitted to the National Green Tribunal. The report says air pollution worsens mental health. It leads to feelings of sadness, cognitive issues, and reduced ability to cope with life problems. According to the report, exposure to pollutants leads to many mental health conditions, like anxiety, mood swings, depression, and even psychotic disorders. Fine particulate matter can even enter the bloodstream, affecting the brain. And it's not just an India phenomenon, it's happening across the world. A study in Rome linked toxic air to mental health. It found that people living in areas with high particle pollution had a greater chance of developing schizophrenia. They also dealt with depression and anxiety disorders. So does improving the air help? Well, it could work. Reducing Rome's average particle pollution by 10% could reduce these conditions by 10 to 30%. Here's what another study says. Air pollution is linked to a decreased quality of life. It increases the risk of depression. It increases the risk of suicidal ideation. Plus, it's linked to diseases like dementia, Parkinson's disease, and autism. Children are particularly vulnerable. That's because their brains are still developing. When exposed to bad air, they develop a horde of mental health problems. It ranges from anxiety and could even lead to bipolar disorder. So how do you tackle this problem? The Delhi government's report suggested two things: staying active and seeking help from professionals. But even that is often not enough. Governments must prioritize clean air. They should look beyond poor lung health and look into the other effects of pollution. As for people, they must be aware of the air quality around them, because bad air is an invisible killer. So it's often a problem that governments and countries ignore. And even when they focus, the approach is narrow. It's always about how it affects our health. Its effect on the lungs, its effect on life expectancy. But for long, we have overlooked its link to mental health. The recent reports prove toxic air is dangerous, and not just for the body. Poor particulate matter is affecting us all. It's no longer a mind over matter scenario. Healthy air is crucial for healthy minds as well.
Our last story tonight is about sibling relationships. One of the earliest and longest lasting relationships in a person's life, also among the most confusing. Siblings will happily donate their kidney to you, but won't share a phone charger. They will shield you from the world, but infuriate you no end. Siblings offer as much grief as joy, but despite the emotional seesaw, they're worth holding close. Which is why this week, many social media feeds took a sentimental route. They turned into family albums because Wednesday was Sibling Day in the US, April 10th. Many countries, in fact, have similar traditions. Europe, for instance, celebrates Brothers and Sisters Day on the 31st of May. India has Raksha Bandhan. It falls in the month of August. So across the world, people celebrate relationships with their siblings, and research says there are three main reasons why. Firstly, the emotional intensity. Siblings have seen you in your nascent stages. They've seen you grow up into your fully formed adult personality. You've done the same for them. So there is shared history, acceptance, and close knowledge of worries, joys, and quirks. Secondly, the relationship has an involuntary nature. It's as if siblings sign a contract at birth. They see the best and the worst of each other, and they don't bolt. You can change your hair, your taste in music, your career trajectory. You can be your real self, and there's a good chance your sibling will be by your side. Thirdly, the everyday contact helps. In most cases, siblings are forced together. This time together can create a strong bond. For many people, it turns a sibling into a built-in best friend. But there's also conflict, commonly known as sibling rivalry. When the children are young, they can fight up to 8 times in 1 hour. But research says this is healthy. It is like an early on-the-job training. It teaches children how to manage emotions. It boosts mental development, enhances social skills, basically teaches them how to live with other people. And this is an important life skill. The problem occurs when sibling rivalries stretch into adulthood. Proximity is no longer required, obligations lessen, and there are lesser opportunities to repair the relationship. Coupled with decades of baggage, this creates friction, and left unresolved, it can affect your well-being. According to a study, people who had distance in their sibling relationships before the age of 20 were more likely to be depressed at age 50. And why is that? Due to the sibling effect. It was long ignored by researchers, but now sibling bonds are considered one of the most important in our lives. There's a shared upbringing, shared genes, shared battles, and shared secrets. No other peer relationship offers this concoction. Siblings are great educators in ways you may not even realize. Look at Wilbur and Orville Wright. They invented the airplane, or tennis icons Venus and Serena Williams. Siblings can be both your closest teammates and your biggest competitors. Studies show that they are crucial for companionship. Warmth between siblings is an important buffer against loneliness. It boosts well-being. Siblings also provide practical support. But chances are you already know all of this. You're lucky if you have a sibling, luckier if you share a strong bond with them. But if you believe there is room for improvement, here are 3 tips commonly shared by psychologists. Give each other permission to change. Be mindful of how your parents affect your dynamic. And make time to enjoy each other's company. Sibling relationships can be the most enduring and the most fulfilling of all, just as long as you don't borrow clothes without asking. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacts with the country's top gamers, also trying his hand at a few games. Floods engulf cities across Russia and Kazakhstan, forcing 100,000 people to evacuate. And in Paris, an athlete sets a new world record climbing the Eiffel Tower with a rope. Finally, we are taking you back in history on this day in 1814. Napoleon was forced to abdicate after his failed invasion of Russia. He was exiled to the Mediterranean island of Elba. Napoleon returned the next year to stake claim on the throne again. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.